There's not a team who missed the CFP who has made more offseason news than the Buckeyes have. Ohio State has hired a new offensive coordinator, so we'll see how that impacts Ryan Day's decision-making there. The roster itself, several players who had the opportunity to go on to the National Football League, like Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson, JT Tuimoloau. I mean, others who would have been high draft picks decided to return for another season. And oh, by the way, the quarterback position. It is going to be a deep and talented QB room in Columbus. And who better to have a conversation about the Ohio State University Buckeyes with than my guy, Bill Rabinowitz of the Columbus Dispatch. This offseason, Bill, that OSU has gone through has made so many headlines. I just ran through a few of them there. But from Ryan Day's perspective, it seems to me that Ohio State has had a really aggressive approach this offseason. Just in general, what does that say to you about the way they're viewing this season?
Yeah, they're all in. They're all in. I think a lot of it has to stem from the fact that Michigan won it all, beat Ohio State for the third straight time. They know that this year is the year they've got to really cash in, and they had a really good recruiting class 2021, and that class, for all of its achievements, is not really, doesn't have a championship to show for it, doesn't have a win over Michigan to show for it. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of those guys, the JT Tuimoloau's, the Jack Sawyers, Travion Henderson's, Emeka Egbuka's, those guys decided to come back.
Now, Ryan Day, seems like for a couple of years now, has been looking to maybe have someone else take over play calling. Brian Hartline is there on staff already. He's been an exceptional recruiter. Got the OC title last year, but then now they add Bill O'Brien into the mix. So do you expect Bill O'Brien to be the offensive play caller?
Yeah, I do. I think that Ryan Day wanted to have somebody who had the experience and the expertise to run the offense. Now, Ryan Day is always going to be involved with the offense. If there's a crucial call on 3rd and 7 against Penn State or Michigan, I think Ryan Day is going to probably make that call. But I think that the day-to-day operation and the routine stuff, certainly he's going to want to have Bill O'Brien handle that. Just like when he hired Jim Knowles, he intended for Jim Knowles to be the head coach of the defense. I think that that's kind of the intent with Bill O'Brien. We'll see how it plays out because, again, Ryan Day's expertise is on offense, and it's easier for him to hand off the reins to a defensive coach. But I definitely believe that Ryan Day wants Bill O'Brien to be the guy on offense.
Now, the QB room is so deep at this point, we're going to need a couple of different questions to tackle it here, Bill. So let's leave the incoming freshmen to the side for a moment and focus on the guys who've been on campus or who've at least played some college football now. Devin Brown had already been there. Lincoln Kienholz had already been there. They add Will Howard into the mix also. So these are all guys who've at least played some college football, and a couple of them who already know Ryan Day's system. How do you expect Will Howard to kind of fit into that mix amongst the other veterans?
Well, I think Will Howard's the front runner. I think he has to be. I don't think he has the career he had at Kansas State and comes to Ohio State if he doesn't think he'll be the guy. But it will be a competition. I mean, Devin Brown, it's a shame what happened to him in the Cotton Bowl, because if he had a good game, stayed healthy and had a good game, then I think Ohio State would feel fairly comfortable with having him be the quarterback next year. But that didn't happen. He didn't play well in the brief time he played before he sprained his ankle. And so, from Ryan Day's perspective, I'm sure he's thinking, well, what has he proven? I can't go into 2024 with him and Lincoln Kienholz as my guys. I need somebody with experience. And Will Howard, really, he's not a 5-star guy. He wasn't as a recruit, but he certainly had the kind of career that makes Ryan Day feel like he could lead them to where they need to go.
And then Air Nolan was already a part of the recruiting class. Yeah. Were you surprised that after, seeing everything play out and having veterans coming in and a big-time recruit already there, were you surprised that Julian Sayin, after the Nick Saban retirement, is now on his way to Columbus as well?
A little bit, because I know they feel very highly, they think very highly of Air Nolan, and they still do. I think it was a case where, if something drops in your lap, potentially, do you take it? Some people will compare it to Quinn Ewers coming to Ohio State a couple years ago. That was different. Quinn Ewers came, I think, because he wanted the NIL money, and he came late. I mean, he came as training camp was starting, so he was never really going to be a factor. And with both Air Nolan and Julian Sayin, they can learn. They don't have to get rushed into anything. They can learn. Will Howard is going to be a 1-year guy, and they can make their impression this year. And so we'll see how it plays out. But yes, I was a little surprised.
And as impressive as Ryan Day's passing attacks have been throughout the years that he was calling plays and has now been the head coach in Columbus for a while at this point, his best Ohio State teams have been ones that have run the football at a really high level. And so Travion Henderson decides not to go to the NFL. He'll be back for another season. And they add Quinshon Judkins in the transfer portal also. That combination of backs, I mean, what should we be prepared for with two guys who've achieved at such a high level in college football already?
Yeah, I think that might be the best duo in the country, right? I mean, that's Quinshon Judkins, all SEC twice, freshman of the year in the SEC, and then you have Travion Henderson, who showed when he's healthy what he can do. And I think that for both of them, it makes sense in the sense that, they always talk about the tread on the tire, right? And so I think that the fact that they're not going to have to rely on either one of those guys for 25 carries a game is probably good. And Ohio State, they always hate to use Michigan as an example, but it worked for Michigan, right? Michigan had the duo of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, and that worked out pretty well for them. So I think that's a formula that can work.
With that in mind, because we're not sure exactly what Michigan football, from a football leadership perspective, what they'll look like heading into next fall there. So for Ohio State, it feels like championship or bust every season, but have they accumulated so much talent that even with the new teams that'll be in from the West Coast, where the expectations will even be beyond what we're accustomed to in Columbus?
Expectations are always pretty high in Columbus. So, but I think this does have a bit of a feel of a make or break year, in the sense that if they were to lose 4 years in a row to Michigan, which we expect Michigan to be somewhat down this year, they're obviously losing J.J. McCarthy. They might lose Harbaugh. They lose Blake Corum. They're losing a bunch of players. And the game next year is in Columbus. If they were to lose that game in Columbus, boy, I think all bets are off. You do have a new AD coming in, Ross Bjork. And so that's something that they'd only want to, contemplate. But you look at this team and you look at who they've added and who they've kept, and we haven't even talked about Caleb Downs. There's not really a weakness on the team if the offensive line improves the way it needs to improve. That's the big question on this team. Other than that, I think they look stacked.
You mentioned Ross Bjork. There's a legacy that Gene Smith leaves behind as the athletic director for Ohio State that so many folks have respected and revered over his time in running the athletic department. So what does Ross Bjork step into? I mean, the finances are always, we're always gobsmacked at how much money they bring in, frankly, how much money they spend as well. So what does Ross Bjork step into?
I think he steps into a pretty stable program. I think it's just a case of, he's a prolific fundraiser, and that's a major job of an athletic director. But he also oversees 36 sports. And there are going to be questions. The men's basketball team is struggling. That'll be an issue he'll have to deal with. But I think he just has to learn the lay of the land. He has no experience with the Big Ten or with Ohio State. So there's going to be a learning curve there. But I think Gene Smith will help him. I mean, there's a transition period now until Gene leaves at the end of June. So there'll be some time for him to get acclimated.
How would you describe what the difference is in running, because he's been at multiple institutions prior to this, but being in a conference like the Big Ten, not just the revenue aspect of it, but some of the sensibilities, the academic and athletic sort of combination of what's prioritized in the Big Ten Conference. With this now, modern version of the direction college sports is going, how different will this be than him in running other athletic departments?
Well, it's going to be a much bigger department than he's run anywhere else. I think Texas A&M has maybe 20 athletic programs. I think Ole Miss had 16 or 18. So that's almost double. I mean, we're talking about 36 programs, and so getting to learn all of those is going to be a big learning curve. But let's face it, college sports is changing so rapidly. I think everyone's kind of winging it. I don't know that anybody knows the lay of the land right now with NIL and the transfer portal and all the uncertainty about that. So I think, he's an experienced guy. He's done this a long time, obviously not at Ohio State, not in the Big Ten, but I think everybody's trying to come to grips with what college sports is evolving into, whatever that is.
Well, as we all make educated guesses on what the future of intercollegiate athletics looks like, we really appreciate you taking the time to help, sort of walk us down that path a bit, Bill.
All right. Appreciate you having me on.